Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk, a conversation with Ariela Suster and Jamira Burley. My name is Colette Defoe, and I'm the office managing partner of Nixon Peabody's Washington, D.C. office. I'm also a partner in our affordable housing and real estate practice group, and I focus my legal practice on all aspects of commercial real estate transactions. For the past few years, Nixon Peabody has hosted the Let's Talk event series, which showcases dynamic female leaders across all industries by inviting them to speak about their career journey and path to leadership, their ups and downs and key moments that made an impact on their lives and careers. We have hosted these events as in-person networking events in several of our offices, and we are really excited to bring these inspirational events to a larger audience in a virtual setting. Before we get to the heart of the program, I'd like to introduce you to Rachel Winkler, Ariela Suster, and Jamira Burley. Rachel is a colleague of mine at Nixon Peabody. She's a member of the cross-border risks team. Her practice focuses on immigration benefits and visas, removal defense, and international criminal investigations. Rachel specializes in providing legal advice to startups, entertainment, influencer, fashion, sports, music, and creative arts industry clients on immigration sponsorship, visa eligibility, and I-9 compliance. She also helps individuals with white-collar convictions defend their immigration status and stay in the United States. Rachel will be moderating today's discussion. Ariela Suster is an inspiring speaker, activist, and award-winning social entrepreneur of Sequence, a handcrafted accessories company focused on disrupting the cycle of violence in her home country of El Salvador by employing young men and women who are vulnerable to gang recruitment. Jamira Burley is an award-winning and internationally recognized social justice activist and policy expert whose work has focused on addressing gun violence, police accountability, and criminal justice reform. Today, she works as a next-gen social impact consultant and head of youth engagement and skills for the Global Business Coalition for Education. Together, Jamira and Ariela recently co-founded I Am Here Too, an inclusive, inspiring platform designed for millennials and Gen Zers from Latinx, African American, and immigrant backgrounds, focused on turning personal struggle into a force for good. So without further ado, let's talk. Rachel, take it away.
Thank you so much, Colette, and thanks to everyone for joining us, in particular, Ariela and Jamira. I'm so excited that you guys are with us today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation and sharing more about the important work that you do. So we just heard a little bit about Ariela and Jamira. Can you guys tell us a little bit more about your backgrounds and yourselves? So Ariela, you're a leader in the fashion industry and this amazing social entrepreneur. Jamira, you are this internationally recognized social justice advocate and a millennial youth whisperer, if you will. Tell us kind of how you guys got to those places.
Hi, thank you so much. We're both so excited to be here and super impressed with your bio, Rach. So I'm from El Salvador. I grew up in El Salvador. I grew up in El Salvador during the Civil War and came to the United States for college. And my family experienced violence firsthand in El Salvador. So I came to the United States, went to college, and worked in fashion for many years. I worked as a fashion editor at big magazines like InStyle magazine, Harper's Bazaar, and was in a path at the fashion world, but it wasn't genuine to me. It wasn't my truth. I wasn't fulfilled, and I wanted to create something that truly was addressing the issue of violence that was occurring in my home country. So I went back to El Salvador and started my company called Sequence, which employs young men at risk of joining gangs, provides them employment. We create really cool products. Rachel's wearing a necklace. And we have training programs for them. But the most important thing has been that through this company, we've created social impact that has really not only transformed the guys' lives who work with me, but also the people in their community. And so that in a summary is my story. I will let Jamira tell hers.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariela. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And I even put on regular pants today. So that shows my level of excitement to be a part of this conversation. But for those who don't know, so I'm originally from West Philadelphia. My claim to fame is that I went to the same high school as Will Smith. Not during the same time. Of course, he is much older than me, but that is my claim to fame. And I grew up in a community that very much it was dealing with the aftermath of the war on drugs and the crack epidemic. I grew up in a family where I was one of 16 children, so I had 15 siblings. And by the time I was 15 years old, I had watched both of my parents and all 10 of my older brothers move in and out of incarceration. And I think for a long time in my upbringing, I assumed that these were the conditions that everyone else around me was experiencing, right? Everyone else knew someone who was in prison. Everyone else attended more funerals than graduations. Everyone else dealt with some level of poverty. And I think in 2005 was kind of the turning point for me as a young person, where I was 15 years old and I had just learned that my 20-year-old brother, Andre, was shot and killed in Philadelphia. It was the same year that my father was convicted of murder. And so I lived at a weird juxtaposition of knowing both a victim and a perpetrator. And I think for a long time, I struggled with trying to understand, one, what about our society cultivated communities in which this was the likely response and in reality for so many people? And then also, what could I as a young person do to transform the lives of the people around me? And so I started my activism very much looking at how can we train other young people how to be violence interrupters, to influence their peers, to influence their family members, to use other tactics than resulting to the use of violence. And through that, we implemented my program, the Panther Peace Corps, across the city of Philadelphia into the top 10 persistently dangerous high schools. And it kind of led me on a pathway of really understanding that oftentimes criminal justice, issues of mass incarceration, issues of gun violence, issues of mental health are oftentimes the public face of much deeper systematic problems. And that's how I got into my journey of really working for and on behalf of young people. Because, you know, they say that it's easy to build strong men and women when they're younger than it is to repair broken families when they're much older. And so I've dedicated my life to really looking at how institutions can create pathways to young people being at the table when decisions about them are being made. And Ariela and I had the pleasure of meeting at an award ceremony where I was extremely nervous and intimidated by her, only to then finally meet a year later and trying to now figure out and working together to really figure out how do we use our stories, how do we use our direct experiences to help other young people who are struggling with the harsh realities of their own lives to really think about how do they heal first, and then hopefully actually create impact in the world around them.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys both for sharing your stories and being here with us today. So you talked a little bit, Jamira, about how you and Ariela connected at an award ceremony, which I imagine was, recognizing you both for the amazing work you do. And now you are on you've launched this new initiative called I Am Here Too. Can you tell us a little bit more about it and, what inspired you both to collaborate together and, launch this program, which I think really does fill a gap in services and resources available to, the young population, if you will.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. And also you have a superior background, so I feel like I need to up my game. But what I will say is that, yes, me and Ariela met in the Kennedy Center. We were originally supposed to meet back in 2016. The craziness of the awards, we ended up meeting a year later. But her brother, Andres, my brother, Andre, immediately when we met, we knew that we were sister friends. And so we were trying to figure out how do we work together in order to share the history of our stories, but more importantly, the tactics that we use over the years to create change, whether through Ariela's life, actually looking at the business aspect and creating products and assets for men and jobs. And for me, looking at policies and practices. And so we formulated I Am Here Too, which is really a call to action for every single person, not just young people, but older people. I think what we've learned during COVID-19 is that in our times of having to really oftentimes talk to ourselves and our walls, and for me, my little puppy, is really trying to figure out, why are we here, right? What is the impact we want to leave in the world around us? Are we finding joy in our own lives and the work that we're doing? And that's what we use as the secret sauce for I Am Here Too, which is to create assets, to create media, to create different tools for the everyday person to be able to really dig deep into who they are as individuals and how can they use their personal experiences to add texture to the conversation on issues from everything from environmental justice to climate change, to gun violence, to women's issues, because we all have a story to share, and it doesn't have to be as dramatic or as traumatic, I should say, as Ariela's and mine, but how do we specifically use the unique aspect of who we are in the world to be able to help to create the world in which we all deserve.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I would add to that. I think Jamira briefly mentioned, how we met, and we had met at the Kennedy Center. We both watched our videos of our stories when they gave us the awards. Jamira watched mine before I watched hers. And I don't know if I explained at the beginning, but my brother Andres, who has the same name as Jamira's brother, was kidnapped in El Salvador and held ransom for over a year. He was held underground, handcuffed, and blindfolded. And my family, experienced so much violence and tragedy throughout the whole year and the years before. And so, when we created this collaboration, which has been in the works for many years since we met, the first was just talking about, wow, finding somebody that has gone through such a traumatic experience and just sharing, how we feel and having that space to be, safe and share these conversations. And then to the next level of like, well, now how do we figure out how to play it forward? And how do we figure out also, hopefully people won't have to go through experiences like ours ever. But if they do, this is a place they can come to, experience our tools, and through our experiences, we've created a journal that we now have on our website that you can purchase, which Jamira said, anybody can purchase it. You don't have to have gone through something traumatic. But the most important thing is for us is coming together as friends and also sharing all the experience that we have done. For me, building a business based on a personal mission, and Jamira creating a movement also based on a personal mission. So for us, it's important for you to think about, you don't have to completely change what you're doing or your job. It's in your current position, you could create and affect change wherever you are, no matter if you're in corporate or a social entrepreneur. So
yeah, and also just to add, I think in the era of social media, we get consumed with the idea that we have to do something, we have to do something grand, right? We have to be the president of some organization. We have to run for office. We have to raise a lot of money. And really, some of the most impactful actions that I've seen over the last few months is just people having really hard conversations with their family members, or people deciding that the way in which they want to show up at work hasn't been their authentic self. So I think that's what we're trying to get at, is for folks to look at holistically, are you living the life that you want to live, both in your personal aspect? Are you doing that professionally? And are you showing up in the communities that you live and work in a way in which that can help to drive all of us forward and be more conscious of the world around us?
I love that. And I love that you guys were both motivated by very, very different, but such similar experiences with violence. And you turned that into such positive forces for change. And you've been positively impacting your communities just in so many different ways. And I'm gonna, brag on you both a little bit here, so bear with me. So Ariela, before you started Sequence, which obviously I'm a big fan of, you were this leader in the fashion industry. You worked for Lucky and InStyle and Harper's Bazaar. How did you mentioned it, just you weren't feeling fulfilled, but how did you, I think it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of confidence to walk away from such a successful career to become a small business owner, particularly a small business owner who's advancing a social mission. Where did you find that confidence, and how, what was your thought process behind kind of jumping off there?
So looking back now, I understand a lot of who I was and as a person, what I was doing. And I think for the longest time in fashion, I was trying to fit in. I was never sort of feeling like comfortable in my own skin. I was always sort of, I don't know, it comes with the fact of now knowing that finding your purpose and your passion is truly what embodies like not feeling like you're working, and truly what it is that gives you the confidence to create something that, even if it's so hard what I've created. When I first started my business, A, I didn't know anything about business. And B, I was like, my mission is going to be to disrupt the cycle of violence and to work with young men who are at risk of joining gangs. It was like actually really dangerous looking back. Didn't really imagine all the repercussions that were going to come after. But I went in with such an intention and purpose that nothing really, I didn't look back was the point. And it didn't seem like a trade-off. It didn't seem like I was leaving something behind that I would regret. It sort of felt like this freeing thing that I was finally walking in a place where I was 100% true to myself and to where I came from. And when I started my business, I used a lot of my fashion contacts to start it. And it was really amazing. I packed all my samples in a suitcase, brought it to New York, and everyone helped me. Like my friends doing free PR, other friends hooking me up with sales. But the most important part about it was the process in El Salvador. One thing is the business, and the other aspect is the young men who I work with. And that has been the most amazing, life-changing, growing experience that I have ever encountered. I went in thinking that, I'm going to do something to create change. I think it's been the other way around. I've been so inspired by the young men I work with, their talent, their resilience, everything that they have gone through. And, one of the things that I have to say is, having gone through such hard experiences and violence was what gave me the open door, an open window to work with these young men, because we could actually relate. I could actually really know what it felt like to wake up and not know what's going to happen, to live in fear, so a lot of these conversations and a lot of these things are a constant between the young men I work with. And so, now I'm just so proud and impressed with all the work and designs that they're doing that, I don't know, it just feels like, I can't even describe what it feels like to own a business and to create change, but it's more internal change rather than all the outside awards or whatever it is. I'm mostly more proud of the men I work with.
I love that. So Jamira, you have been, you've been crushing it since you're 15. When you started an anti-violence program in your high school that, was recognized by the Pennsylvania governor's office and expanded throughout the city, pursuant to a $50,000 grant. And you were 15 then. Since then, you have, served in a variety of policy positions over the past decade, focused on, youth engagement and mitigating violence. And, you've been recognized by the Obama White House as a champion of change and a Forbes 30 under 30 honoree. What is the accomplishment or accolade that you are most proud of personally?
It's so funny because I feel like, one, I definitely feel old, but two, I think if I I won't lie. I feel like when I look back on my life, I feel like I've definitely done and been in spaces and places that I would have never imagined or dreamed up in my entire life. Like my imagination just didn't allow me to dream that big. But if I think about why I got involved in this work, it has always been about how do I ensure that other people don't have to experience the same kind of violence or the same type of trauma that I have. And just over the last few years, seeing my younger siblings choose a path to education and graduate from high school and to go to technical school and college, I think for me is my greatest accomplishment is to show them that there is a different path and that they don't have to appear to the same likelihood or response of their predecessors. And so, yeah, if I think about everything that I've accomplished, the places and spaces that I've been, the greatest accomplishment is showing young people that they don't have to be defined by what has happened to them. That they can choose and they can choose their own path and write their own story.
I love that. And I'm sure you're not only inspiring your own brothers and sisters, but, just all of the young people that you interact with on a daily basis. So, I am inspired by you. Okay. I know that you both do a lot of partnership cultivation. Ariela in the private sector, working with businesses through Sequence. Jamira, you do it kind of in your policy position capacity. Ariela, you've partnered with Microsoft, with Mac, with Universal, Bank of America, Diane von Furstenberg. Tell us how you guys go about building those partnerships, building those relationships.
You want me to start, Ariela? I think she's froze. So I'll start until she gets unfrozen. So interesting enough, I think over the last few years, I think we've all seen a plethora of companies kind of realize the need for them to be vocal, for them to be financially and politically engaged in what's happening in the world. And a lot of the work that I've done over the last few years working with brands like Target and Adidas is to really help them, one, identify what is their unique voice that they want to have in the community? How does that unique voice in the communities that they impact, the issues that align with those, and how do they come to the table being authentically engaged, and to ensure that that their customers, their consumers, as well as their employees feel like they have a champion and that they're working for an organization that actually cares about who they are. And so luckily enough, a lot of those opportunities have come to me, but I have seen over the last year, especially since the death or the murder of George Floyd, companies really making very bold statements about how they want to be politically and socially engaged with social justice issues. I would challenge each and every one of them is to, it's really cute and nice to make bold statements, and it's really cute and nice to commit large amounts of money. But, the work is in the fine print, and the work is in who are you engaging with at the community level, directly impacted communities, to really help structure what these programs need to look like, because otherwise we're throwing money into the wind and we're only creating more barriers for trust to be built between the corporate sector and communities, particularly communities that are really struggling right now.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Ariela, is that you back?
Yes, sorry. My computer for some reason died. So.
Oh, no worries. I know that.
I just want to remind everyone, Ariela is a millennial, but sometimes she reminds me that she's an older millennial.
No, my computer, remember, it died.
Oh, really?
Well, I'm glad you're back. So Jamira was just talking a little bit about cultivating partnerships, which was, I think, particularly relevant right now. Do you, just to follow up on that question, Jamira, what would you tell a company who's interested in doing something more, right? Interested in putting out, getting more engaged, but doesn't know where to start? Maybe they're not, maybe particularly if they're not like a huge corporation that's used to kind of getting in the mix, what's a good first step to take?
I think being transparent, right? We don't expect any company, any organization, any business leader to be an expert on day one. But I think showing a level of care and awareness of what's happening while also being transparent that you yourself are going through this learning journey, that you yourself as an organization, as a company, are engaging your employees to figure out how you can best engage. And then also the next step I would say is like, how does your corporate, your own corporate identity align with certain issues and missions, and how can you ensure you're showing up to the table authentically? Who are the people that you're engaging with on the community level to help you structure what that looks like? But I would say the first step has to be about learning and being transparent with those you work with, those are who you're consumers with, that you are also on this journey. You're trying to ensure that you're showing up to the table authentically and trying to be as honoring those who have been impacted.
That makes sense. Ariela, can you talk a little bit maybe from kind of the small business perspective? How do you approach larger companies or organizations like, Vital Voices and the Aspen Institute to create partnerships that support your mission?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would say that I've done a lot with Sequence is the collaborations. And everyone always asks me how, a tiny business in El Salvador who works with a mission to disrupt the cycle of violence can connect with really huge corporations and create these partnerships. I think the secret of it is aligning with the values, and that always the collaborations have to be mutually beneficial. So for me, I always, either the partners seek me or I seek the partners. I start to think about, what are the things that they're working on? What are the initiatives? What are the things that they care about? What are the things that they want to accomplish? And then what are the things that in my business we want to do as well? And how could we align in creating something together? I never approach these collaborations as to what can I get from it. It's more like, let's build this together and think about, how can we amplify each other's initiative, mission, whatever it is. I think, one of the biggest, the first collaboration I did was with MAC Cosmetics, and they ordered 20,000 bracelets. I don't think we were either like prepared or thought that it was possible, but they wanted to show their employees that they were doing something that was, creating change, but was also really genuine to them. And so we did a video that showcased their mission, and it was just a very collaborative experience. And when I look at these big partnerships, every single partnership has been that. So I would say that. And the other thing that I would say is working with social entrepreneurs or activists. One of the collaborations or partnerships that we don't accept or that we shy away from is those that just come to us thinking that, exposure is enough, or they'll offer something that they'll get more out of it, but they won't think about that we also need resources. We also, like for me, I'm also a business. I also employ people. So the importance of also having that understanding that we're not just here to speak and all do these things, but we're also here, to affect change and create change. And that change also comes with resources. So, that's what I would say. Jamira, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, since you also do a lot of collaborations.
The only thing I would add to based on what you said is that, to your point, is, oftentimes big and large companies come to local organizations and to experts and expect them to do things just for the idea of exposure. And I think if you're going to authentically engage, is that just like any service or resource, you should also pay for these services and resources, because especially if we think about like the idea of equity and social justice, it starts with first, how are you engaging with your partners and ensuring that it is an equitable relationship and that it's not just mutually, you're not the only one gaining something from the partnership.
How do you guys envision I Am Here To establishing or creating or cultivating these partnerships and collaborations? Have you started down that road yet? Do you have an idea of what you want that to look like?
Yeah, I'll start, Ariela. A little bit. So it's actually, there's two kind of areas that we see these partnerships. One is actually working with, so the organization itself is going to, one, cater to individual people who are on their leadership journey, while also thinking about how can we bring these same practices and ideologies and tactics to the corporate settings, especially as their employees are trying to also navigate their own personal social impact and activist journey. And so working with different companies on really thinking through how do we engage their employees to better align with the company values, how do we engage their employees to feel like they're being listened to and that they're also getting the motivation and development that they need in order to be active and to stay, to maintain the retention within the organization. And the second part is how do we make branded products and initiatives and content to continue to engage and inspire young people to be a part of the process. You know, we've seen a lot of amazing collaborations over the last few months, especially since the Super Bowl, where companies are engaging those youth voices, those activists, those change makers in a way that really talks about issues, while also in a way that talks about issues, but that brings in everyday people to be a part of the conversation. So it doesn't make anyone feel like they're not smart enough or they're not brave enough or they don't have the right title and money to be able to effectively engage in social justice.
The other part that I would say is, so we have the products up and we invite you to go to iamhere2.com. We have the journals that both Jamira and I have created in digital version and printed. And then the other products are the merchandise. Everything is created by change makers. And that's the part that was really important to both of us. Mm-hmm. We're collaborating with women who have really amazing projects in prisons here in Mexico City. We're producing also the bracelets at my workshop at Sequence with men who are at risk of joining gangs. And a lot of the products that we envision to create are going to be in collaboration with change makers and people around the world that are also like us affecting change. So we do invite you to go to our website. The journal is really one of the things that we wanted to create as the starting point for this venture. And it's, you know, a journal that goes deep within to really do an evaluation of where you are, to come up with your personal mission, your purpose. And we created videos for each week. So it's a 4-week program. And we created videos for each week to guide you and share with you the experience of creating the journal, but also how we've actually filled out the journal ourselves. So we do invite you to purchase it and to join the Facebook community that we are creating, which will be private, to meet other change makers or other people going through the process.
Well, I think everyone on the call, I definitely encourage everyone to check out, you know, Facebook and Instagram. You already have a great Instagram too, which I joined. So I encourage everyone to do that. I really want to shift just for a little bit so we can talk a little bit more about your guys' careers mm-hmm. and the advice that you would give to, you know, young people who look up and aspire to achieve, you know, the things that you guys have accomplished. So, you know, Jamira, you know, you work with so often with youth engagement with kids. You know, what's your advice to young people who are interested in starting out, but may not see or envision a future of success, or may not know that those options exist? You know, when they're thinking about what kind of career they have, what do you tell them? What do you talk about, and how do you motivate them to want to engage in these types of activities in the future?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I do prefer to work with young people. There's a way that they see the world that is so refreshing. You know, they're not boggled down by all the political and social constraints just yet, which is a level of innocence that I feel like we don't take into consideration when we move young people through the whole process of education. That being said, I'm deeply inspired by young people. And I say that in a way because I think that this generation, not just millennials, but also Gen Zs and future generations, are so much more politically and socially conscious than we've ever seen before. And the way that they're looking at issues and the intersectionality of them is truly, I think, transformative, and it's going to create change in a way that I don't think the vast majority of us are really ready for, which, that's kind of fun, right? We need people to push us to dream a little bit bigger. That being said, I think young people are also struggling with an identity crisis of trying to compete in a world in which everything feels so plastic, especially on social media. Everyone seems to be doing so great all the time. And so one of the things that I always say to young people that I meet with, both here in the United States and in many of the countries that I've collaborated with before, is really trying to identify, what specifically about you and your experience that makes you want to do something, right? Like, ground yourself in your own personal values, know why you want to engage, because once you know yourself, once you can identify how those experiences have created your own trajectory, then you can better show up in a world in which is constantly trying to change you and make you feel like you have to show something on social media in order to prove that you're doing something. And also I tell them, to start small, that not everyone has to create a national organization. Not everyone has to be a global ambassador for some issue. That some of the biggest impact that we see around the world are folks who start in not just their dinner table, but in their local schools, to their communities. And when you do that, you're really starting to understand the issues in a way that I think is hard to do when you just jump fully into a national project or a global initiative. So it's really about starting small, knowing yourself and understanding the issues around you and how you want to show up for those issues.
I love that. Ariela, obviously, please jump in if you have advice that you give to young people who are inspired by you. But I would also love if you could talk a little bit about, your advice to people who are interested in reinventing themselves, kind of like what you did.
Jamira and I always joke that I've reinvented myself so many times. And look, for me, truly, you define a personal mission. And I think that's the core of it, right? And as you evolve and grow, that personal mission also grows. But it's really important. And what I would say is, write it out. Like, think about, what is it that makes you happy? What is it that you want to leave behind? What is it that makes you wake up in the morning and think about, not just about yourself, but also, look, we're in a world that we're interconnected. Like, it's not just about you. There's not one thing that you could do on your own that doesn't affect others. And so for me, it's always rooted in that growth, personal growth, that I just, follow that flow and sort of the reinvention happens. But I think the first one was, taking the big step of leaving the fashion world. And I would say that's one of the best decisions that I've made, one of the most genuine things that I have done. And it really came out of that sort of inside of being uncomfortable. And I think that that's the first sign of just being uncomfortable in the place that you are. And instead of staying stuck and thinking about, there's nothing I can change, or continuing to feed yourself with all those negative and self-limiting thoughts, is get out of that situation soon, because all that walls that you build inside are walls that you're also building, and that it's harder to take down. And so for me, after that first sort of jump, I always think about, if I'm not comfortable and really uncomfortable in a place, it's time to change. And I think that's when, during the pandemic, it also felt like, okay, just this is time of introspection, and to really think about, for a lot of people, it's like, is this job, is this current situation pushing you to make a change in your life? Like, to think about it and do it.
And if I can add, I would also say, you're never going to be done learning, and you're never going to be done working through these issues. And I think, people can look at Ariela and I and think that, oh, they must have it all together. But there have been moments over the last few months that we've had to check each other and be like, well, maybe have you looked at the issue from this way? Or should you still be talking to that person, right? Or are you doing this because this is where you find joy? Or are you finding yourself doing this because you feel guilty, right? And so what we're trying to really, I think, hone in is that life is all about understanding how tactics can be used to improve the conditions of your world, but more importantly, how it can improve your own self-worth and how you see yourself. But it's not going to be, it's not going to be fixed overnight. But once you're aware, it's like, how do you constantly check yourself and have your friends and those around you continue to hold you accountable in that process?
One of the things that I would say is that I admire about Jamira and that I've learned so much through her is that, we experience rejection and we make mistakes, but seeing Jamira, like, so many opportunities come and so many opportunities of rejection and how she sort of deals with that. And it's really looking at it as like reframing it as opportunities. That has been really inspiring. And that's something that I would say is, rejection can be something really good too. And that's something that I've learned from her. So
rejection is a redirection. That's all. I say this now, but then in the moment, I'm definitely like screaming into a pillow. So again, it's not going to be perfect.
Well, so Jamira, I watched a really interesting talk you did for Forbes in October 2020, where you said something that I loved. You talked about like why you also shouldn't say yes to everything. And I think it's so hard to learn that, and it's so hard to implement that on a daily basis. How did you come to that? I feel like it's like a revelation when you finally like figure that out for yourself. And how do you put that into practice?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And sometimes Ariela reminds me that that's the way I want to live my life. And I say that to say that, in a world in which that tells you that abundance is great, right? The more you feel like you constantly have to absorb. And also you feel like, there is there is a scarcity of resources and opportunities. That's false. That's a false narrative that isn't true. There's a scarcity of recent opportunities that are very maybe niched to specifically your direction in life, but for the vast majority of opportunities, they're in abundance. That being said, I think what I had to learn is that I moved to New York. So I was on the Hillary Clinton campaign. We clearly lost, if you all remember. And I was in a funk for about 6 months. I was like working, I was living in DC. And I remember leaving shortly after the election and coming back and crying in the taxi. And that's when I knew that I had hit a wall. Because I was just overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed with all the things that I had committed myself to. I was overwhelmed with all the questions that my family had about what I was doing with my life now that clearly we lost the election. I was like, well, thanks for the reminder. And so what I learned is that I had committed myself and had agreed to do things that didn't bring me joy, right? That didn't align with also where I saw my career, where I saw the work that I was doing. But I felt like I had to say yes because of guilt, for one, feeling like when you're in this space, you have to say yes to all the opportunities that enables for you to do your work. But also guilt in the sense of like, I asked for these opportunities and now God is giving them to me, so I should respond accordingly. When the real thing is, she is actually giving you these opportunities for you to decide what are the best ones for you. And so how I put that into practice is that over the last year, I've like written down what is my 5-year plan? Where do I see myself both personally and professionally? Ideally, how do I see my work day, right? What is the things that I want to be doing in order to find fulfillment? And then when opportunities come to me, I can say, well, does this align with my 5-year plan? Does this align with the mission of the work that I'm doing? Or am I just saying yes because this opportunity presents itself? And then how I also put it into practice that I'm a firm believer of sharing of opportunities. So when folks come to me with something that doesn't align with not necessarily my values, but my vision, how can I share those opportunities and resources with other young people? And I think that has brought me so much more joy than taking, doing. And I say this as someone who's currently doing 3 panels today. But it's all about learning and relearning and unlearning. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
No, it totally does. And I feel like, what both of you have talked about is putting your mission and putting your kind of game plan in writing. And I think you've created this amazing new resource that helps people do that with the journal. So I think it's such a good example of kind of what what you both live and putting it into practice and creating a tool that others can use. Are there any other resources that you found helpful as you were both starting your careers and your professional journeys in activism and social entrepreneurism? Any other resources out there that you thought were absolutely critical to your success?
Well, I know there's a lot of professionals on the line, and I think when I think about what got me here, it was one, sheer luck. In many ways. I mean, I'm smart, I'm brilliant, but the vast majority of the time, it was through luck, and it was through mentorship and people in positions of power who legitimized who I was. And that's just how the world works. Is unfortunately is that the way in which it's currently structured is that there's limited pathways for young people, particularly young people who come from impacted communities, to get the opportunities that they deserve in order to be in spaces like this. And so for those who are on the line who are trying to figure out how they can give back or do something, one of the ways you can do that is through mentorship. I don't believe that mentorship is the end all be all, but there is something so powerful when you can provide a young person an insight into a world they have no idea exists, right? Exposure is key for young people to dream of something other than what they see on TV. And also for them to feel like someone is in their corner and can legitimize them from whether or not helping them write a recommendation letter for college or helping them get their first internship. Those actions can be truly transformative because it can enable for them to really get their foot in the door and to start on their pathway for change. But it really requires oftentimes someone giving a hand up to the next generation or to someone else who is seeking or desiring a new reality. So shout out to all my mentors out there who I'm probably being a horrible mentee and not responding to your emails.
I love that. And I love the shout out to mentors. I have also had phenomenal and amazing mentors my whole career, and wouldn't be where I am today, but for, those people. So I think that is such, killer advice and can't be emphasized enough, particularly, to mentees and mentors, and hopefully people who are mentored pass it on, because I think that's definitely something we all have the responsibility to do when we've been the beneficiaries of that type of servant leadership. Ariela, any resources that you swear by that you couldn't have been successful without?
I mean, I would definitely go with the mentors for sure. Like Jamira said, I have an amazing mentor who, Diane von Fustenberg, who works who's a big flex.
I say this every time she mentions it, subtle flex.
But you know what? Like one of the things that she says and it's true, because literally every morning that she wakes up, she does 3 things that are not for herself. So she'll answer emails or do something every day. From anywhere you are, you could do that practice. And so that's been one of the things that, has been really inspiring to me. But the other thing that I would say that has been really important to me, and I think Jamira would also agree, is, we do a lot of work and we give a lot and we're focused a lot all the time on accomplishing and creating. But some of those times when we're going through challenging times, our personal health and our wellness sometimes suffers. Like sometimes either stress or anxiety for me has been a big one. And so the practices that I've acquired throughout the years, like meditation and exercise, I continue to build up more and more. Think of ways how you can heal yourself, because it is a constant journey. And for both of us, we've experienced a lot in the past and we've left that behind. But now knowing that, as we continue to move forward, there's practices that always should bring us balance in moments of stress. And I think for everyone, for the past year, I'm sure we've all gone through a lot of changes and a lot of different things that we've experienced. So I would definitely say to be mindful of that when you are feeling stressed, to take that time to think about what are the things that, like Jamira say, bring you joy, and what are the things that also bring you to balance, because you make the best decisions not out of anxiety or fear, but when you're also, at peace with yourself, and you can share more. You can share more of yourself when your energy is aligned with, all the great things and positive things.
I love that. So we opened it up for questions from the audience, and there are a couple that I think I would love to ask you guys. So one in particular, what advice do you have for young women of color on making their voice heard?
First, telling other people to shut up. I've clearly had too much coffee so far this morning. One I would say is that first realizing that you have something to offer, right? Believing in yourself that your voice, your experiences are needed, and regardless of what the naysayers may say, right? And then also, honing in on what you uniquely can bring to the table. Is there an experience? Is there a point of view that you can add to the conversation? But I think it first starts with believing that you deserve to be heard, that your voice matters, and that you have something that can really shift the conversation and hopefully open the door for folks to understand an issue, a cause, or a viewpoint in a different light. But it definitely requires for, other people using their ears to listen, to hear, and not listen to respond.
One of the things that I would say is before, when I worked in fashion, I remember, that industry was always very sort of exclusive. And maybe, in some ways, that's why I felt so kind of not myself and uncomfortable. I think that there's a lot that needs to be changed. And I think for women of color, we've both experienced in many situations when we have stayed quiet and we haven't said anything, or we've just let things sort of pass, or made decisions that were not grounded in our truth. And I think now it feels like things are changing, and it feels that, that we're more comfortable with our voices. And I have to say, one of the things that has been really helpful for both of us is being part of networks of people that, either look like us, or that it also give us the opportunity to share not only our experiences, but also our voices. And I think that, for us, Jamira, Vital Voices has been an organization that, has worked with us for many years, that has amplified the impact of the work that we're doing. And I think for us, it's not only important for us to be heard, but also because the work that we do affects so many people. And so, it does feel like there's change, and it does feel very hopeful. And I think for both of us, it does feel like new opportunities are opening up that before we didn't see. So, and that feels in a very positive way.
Yeah. And Audre Lorde once said, if you are silent about your pain, they will kill you and say you liked it. So don't feel like you don't have the opportunity to be heard. At the very least, even when people aren't listening, you should still use your voice to speak out.
I love that. Okay, additional question from the audience. If we, as a company who hasn't yet branched out into social impact causes, what's the best way to get started? And who, do you recommend that we contact an organization that we like, or an individual that we like? How do we prioritize what is most effective for our company?
Yeah. Well, don't just randomly contact organizations because the easy thing that ends up happening is that you end up contacting a national organization that is doing great work, but isn't going to have the type of local impact that you desire. One thing I would say is, is to work with your employees to understand what are the issues they care about, right? Which you'll find is that there's a handful of employees, they may care about women's gender issues, or they may care about violence, or they may care about education. And I think it becomes so much more authentic when it's a representation of the issues and real life experience of your employees. but also where you're residing at, like location matters. So are you in a community? Are you in an area that is dealing with a specific issue? How are you using your political capital? And it doesn't mean you always have to speak publicly, but you can make that phone call to that policymaker, or you could write that letter or write that op-ed, or you can donate to a local organization. But I think holistically, it requires you first identifying what are the issues and stuff that your employees care about. Where are you locally based, and how is that sits in regards to the political discourse? And then if there's not someone on staff who can manage that, like figuring out, is there an organization, is there a company that you can partner with that can really help you structure with your social impact strategy and donation and giving looks like on a larger scale. But yeah, definitely look within first before seeking outside validation or help.
I love that. All right, guys. Well, we only have a couple minutes left, so I would love, first of all, let me thank you both for joining me. This has been such a great conversation, and it was so nice to spend such a good chunk of time with you both. I would love to hear what's next for I Am Here Too. How can we help support the organization, and what do you guys see happening in the future?
We have so many dreams.
I know.
So the first thing you could do is purchase the journal. The second thing you could do is give it to someone else. But also what we're really interested in doing is to do workshops with organizations, individuals, and young people about their own personal journey and development, because we really believe that everyone is a change maker, but it's requiring understanding the tools and skills that you need in order to make the impact that you desire. So for us, it's how do we get in more spaces and places? How do we share the tactics and tools that we're curating? And then also, partner with organizations who are trying to figure out what is their social justice impact they want to make. And Ariela and I can help you strategize in doing that.
One of the things that I would say is that Jamira touched on briefly was, we love working with corporations because we've worked with them before, and also they sometimes feel like completely they have to do something bigger or look outside. And Jamira touched on something really important, is first go within the organization. There's so many change makers inside that haven't realized. And also locally in that community that you're actually working on, you can affect so much change. So I think that's one of the things that we're looking to engage the corporations and the people that we've worked with is, how do your employees show up as their authentic self? Because that authentic self will truly know exactly how they want to affect change, whether it's inside the organization or outside.
Well, I think that is wonderful advice to end our talk. Thank you both for joining us. It was such a pleasure. Colette, thank you so much for your introduction. Following the session, we'll post a short blog post and we'll share those links to I Am Here Too. And I'm obviously always happy to answer questions and get anybody connected to Ariela and Jamira. And I look forward to continuing to work with you both. And again, so grateful to have you on today. It was such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. And thanks to everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.